Hi everyone, welcome back to another week on the Brush by Brandy YouTube channel. My name is Brandy and I'm the owner and artist behind Brush by Brandy. And this week we're going to explore a topic that I think we've all struggled with, and that's the topic of indecision. It's nothing new to me. If you guys follow me, you know usually my pieces don't always end up how I envision them, or sometimes I change path along the way. You don't always know up front how things are going to turn out. So the good thing is we always say it's just paint, right? Well, it is. It's just paint. So there's nothing that you can do that you can't come back and change later, even as you're working on it through the paint process. So I had that happen to me this week. I actually started this little piece behind me on my live video this week. And remember how it looks right now, because where I'm going with it is nothing like where it started. But I started this on my live video, and as I started working on it, I felt all those tinges of indecision, like I'm going in the wrong direction. And so I took a step backwards and I decided to go back and look at what my inspiration for this piece was. I knew that I wanted to use a transfer on it. I wasn't really sure which one. So I went back and I looked at the size of my piece, and what I found was the best transfer for the size of my piece was this one here. This is called Remarkable Garden. This is from A1 Transfers. I knew that I wanted to use this. I just couldn't figure out, it didn't work with this color scheme that I had behind me. And so what do? Well, I'm going to pivot. And so I took my same colors that I was using on this piece on my live video and I remixed them into colors that match absolutely perfectly with this transfer. So I'm going to change direction and I'm going to show you along the way how to do that. So you guys stick with me, and I hope you guys learn a couple lessons, and it's okay. Feel free to change your mind along the way. Enjoy the paint process. Be creative. Don't feel like you're ever stifled by decisions that you've already made, because you can always pivot. So let's get started and take this guy in a whole new direction. I picked up this cute little sewing cabinet off my local Facebook marketplace nearby my home. It's really cute and in good condition. I'm excited to get started on this one. I'm going to start off on this cute little sewing cabinet by giving it a good cleaning. I've already taken off all of my hardware, and that's in a dish. It was just wooden knobs. I'm going to spray it down with the cleaner. This is TSP dissolved into a spray bottle of water. TSP is trisodium phosphate. It's a hardware store cleaner. This piece is actually pretty clean, and I'm not getting any residue off when I wipe it. And then I'm going to go ahead and rinse my cleaning residue down with some water. This is just going to remove any residue from that cleaner that I may have left over. Now that I knew that I didn't want to continue in my original finishes in the blues, I needed to decide a direction, and so I pulled out this transfer, which is called Remarkable Garden from A1 Transfers, and I'm going to go ahead and mix up some custom colors to really complement the colors in my transfer. I find that if I'm stumped on direction, pulling out something for inspiration can really be a great starting point. Now, this can be a transfer, it can be a paper, it can be anything you want to use on the piece, but it can also just be something in your room, a pillow, a fabric, a picture, anything that you like, you can pull color inspiration from. My transfer has a lot of orange tones in them, and on the color wheel, orange and green are opposite colors. They will complement each other. And so I'm going to go ahead and take my blues and my yellows that I used on my live on my original finish. Yellow and blue make green. I'm going to mix up some custom greens. Now, I knew the rough shades that I wanted to get to. I just mixed them on some cardstock, and so I'm going to repeat the process and try to get as close to those tones as I can. If they're not exact, that's okay, because they were just some inspiration colors. I'm taking two different shades of blue, which are called Thunder and Lightning, the darker shade, and My Frenchy Blue is the lighter shade, and I'm going to tint them both using the same yellow, which is called Retro Wallpaper. These are all from Mint by Michelle Paint. I will link these all in the description for this video. I really liked the shades of green that both of these blues mixed into, so I didn't need to do a whole lot of adjusting. They were just really complementary to the colors already in my transfer. I had started this cute little sewing table with you guys on my live video, but after I got off, I started feeling like this was not the right direction for me. And I started pulling some of my inspiration actually from this transfer here. This is from A1 Transfers, and this is called Remarkable Garden. And I wanted to pull some colors out of here, and so I mixed up some custom greens. So I'm taking this piece from blue to green. Now, it's not all that uncommon that you don't get it right on the first time, and that's the cool thing about paint, is no harm done. I've got a great base here. I can just go right over it and paint with my next color, which is going to be my custom greens. So I went ahead and mixed up two greens using Mint by Michelle Paint. And I'm going to go ahead and lay them on using my Klingon brushes. And then I did go ahead and pull this piece of decoupage paper out of the drawer. Since I'm no longer going in the direction of blues, I'm going to save this one for another project. I just gave it a little spritz with some water. I was able to pull it all out in one piece, and now I can let this set aside, and I'll use this for another project. I am going to keep my concept the same, and I'm going to keep my darker green down here at the bottom. I really love these mixes, and I'm really loving the greens right now. Now, I'm not sure if I'll get one coat coverage over these blues. If I don't, it may take me 2 coats, and that's okay. Sometimes that's the consequence of changing your mind, is it does take an extra coat to go ahead and get those colors changed over. I'm going to brush on my darker green, which is a mix of Mint by Michelle in Thunder and Lightning and Retro Wallpaper. And the other cool thing about this is from the same 3 colors, I will end up with a total of 5 colors and then infinite mixes in between. But I mix these greens, and there's a million other mixes that you can do. And it can get you some longevity out of the paint colors that you have in your stash. And if you don't have the color that you want, you can always mix it. I'm going to do a basic 2-color blend, only I'm going to carry my darker color up a little bit higher on the side so that it's not just a straight across to ombre pattern. This one here is a mix of My Frenchie Blue and Retro Wallpaper. This is a really awesome paint to work with. It does blend really nicely. It's an all-in-one paint though, and so blendability with an all-in-one paint is not that common, and so I was kind of surprised by the blendability of this paint. I'm going to carry these down together. I want a nice wide overlap in between the two, and so I'm just going to start mixing these 2 colors together on the center of my piece. I'm not using water in this first coat, but I do anticipate that on my second coat I will need some. And now I'm going to come back with my brush for my darker green and just brush that up. I have good coverage, but I think I am going to need another coat of this just to perfect the blending on the next go round. So I'll just plan on that I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, there's my nice fresh green base. I'm going to go ahead and work my way around my table. I get asked all the time if I come back after the end of my blends and I do the inside of my piece. I do this every single time on every single piece. I always paint around the edges of my drawer, and then I do the inside of my frame. It's not the most exciting part, so you don't always see this part on camera, but you can believe that it always gets done. I make sure none of my paint is gathered up around my drawer opening so that my drawers don't stick. And I make sure that my paint matches the frame. The inside of the frame matches the front of the body. I had also painted my drawer sides in a yellow when I did this piece live. Because I'm changing my color scheme, I'm going to go ahead and change my drawer sides as well. I did end up deciding that I needed to do 2 coats of my new paint color to get full coverage over the old and perfect this blend. So let's go ahead and get my second coat laid on. I'm going to repeat the same process that I did on the first coat, laying on my darker green, my lighter green up top, and then working them together in the center. I did end up bringing a dry, clean, neutral brush that I used to kind of swirl the colors together, and then I smoothed that out once they were worked together. The top on this piece had some beautiful wood grain, so I knew I wanted to preserve it. I went ahead and gave it a good sanding using my Surf Prep sander with an 80, a 120, then a 220 grit paper. Now I'm going to start applying my transfer. So what I did first with this transfer is I laid it all out in the correct order. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the sheets that I know that I'm not using. So my piece is fairly small, so I'm only going to apply this top 2/3 of the transfer. So I'm actually going to remove these bottom sheets, and I'll save these and I can use them on a future project. And then this also has some loose sheets of extra flowers that I'll take out and save these for later. So I've actually got quite a few sheets of this transfer left that I'm not going to be using. The next thing that I did is I took my sheets and I'm going to start in the center of my design. So I took my 2 center designs and I cut off anywhere that they're going to seam together. There is a light clear halo around the edges of the transfer, and I don't want those to overlap because that makes the seams more apparent. So anywhere I need to seam 2 pieces together, I'm going to cut right up to the edge of the design. Just like that. And I get right up to that edge, and that way I don't have that extra clear halo. So I've already done that with my next sheet, and now let's come over here and apply it. I've tilted my piece back just so I have a better vantage point, and this is about where my placement's going to go. So I want to make sure that I line these up on the top to a nice straight line, and also that my seam is nice and straight. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this from the backing sheet. And I'm going to find my placement, and I'm going to be really careful with it up until I've got a nice clean seam, and then I'll seat my transfer. All right, and I found my placement, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to seat this transfer. Now I've got a couple places that I need to make cuts. I've got a line here where my drawer box ends, so I'm going to go ahead and make that slice. And I'm going to ride my knife just right along the bottom of my drawer box. And then I'm going to have a little tiny lip right here of my transfer, and I'm going to let that wrap that corner under the drawer box. And I've also got another edge here that I want to cut. Before I do that, I'm just going to seat this onto the body just so it doesn't fall away when I cut that. And I'm going to ride this right into. All right, and now I've got a nice, this piece is completely free. I'm going to wrap this corner with this one here, so I'm actually going to leave it attached, but let's go ahead and rub some of this on right here. I'm going to rub over the entirety of my transfer one time, making sure I get all the edges in particular. All right, and then I can come back and I can find an edge of my transfer, and I'm going to choose this little upper edge right here. I'm going to hold that with my fingernail, and then I'm going to pick up my clear backing sheet as I rub the transfer. It's pretty easy. You want to be especially careful of the edges, so I'm going to ride the edges first and make sure that those are nice and clean, and then I'm watching my transfer as I go. Any areas that want to pull back with my backing sheet, I know that those need a little more rubbing. And that came away really easily. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this little section down here. There is a little seam in the wood, so I'm just going to cut my transfer right along that. I could cut this bottom section here, but I'm actually just going to wrap it onto the bottom of my piece. And we will wrap this corner here. So what I want to do is I'm going to first wrap this edge, and it's going to go into this crevice, and I'm going to press that into there with my transfer tool, and then I can seat this section here. Now anywhere that I've got a crease like this, a hard crease, I try to come back and slice it with my razor knife, and that way it doesn't tear. I create a seam right there. Otherwise, you're forcing the transfers to pull, and it will want to tear, and you'll get an uneven edge. If I cut it myself, I can control how it's. Just going to take, I'm actually using the back side of my Surf Prep rad pad, and I'm just going to burnish over the top of my transfer. And this just rubs out any air bubbles, presses it in, seats it nicely into my furniture piece. That's a beautiful placement. So the next portions I'm going to do, I'm going to keep working from the center outward. So I'm going to do these two sheets here, and then I'll come and do the sides of my piece. Not only can you apply transfers to a painted surface, but they also do really well applied onto wood. So I'm going to take this little swag here and I'm going to apply it onto my top, which is a raw wood surface. I've sanded this with my Surf Prep sander. It's nice and smooth. I'm going to go ahead and find my placement on here. Right about, I'm going to center it on the top. Right about there. Here's what my piece looks like after I've got my transfer all applied. I did decide to go ahead and paint these little wooden knobs. My Surf Prep sanding pads have the perfect size holes to hold my knobs while the paint is drying. This little cabinet is called the Martha Washington Sewing Cabinet, and they have these little flip-up tops where anybody would have stored any of their knitting or anything in the little cubbies below. So I flipped up the tops and I want to go ahead and add a stencil detail on the inside. I'm using a stencil from the Victorian Stencil Pack by Grace on Design. This is a beautiful stencil pack. It's got 3 designs in it, and all of them are beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and apply it using a little bit of Redesign with Prima Decor wax in Eternal and one of their stencil brushes. Stenciling and gilding wax is extremely easy. I highly recommend it if you struggle with stenciling. I'm not using any stencil adhesive here. I'm just holding my stencil in place and I'm swirling over the top of it with my stencil brush. Because I'm doing it in this paste wax formula, it doesn't have any bleed through under the stencil, so I end up with these nice, clean, crisp lines and in a rich metallic. This gold detail up on the top is going to tie in with the little gold that I put on the legs of this piece, and these little details mean a lot. Once your decored wax dries for 24 hours, it is optional to seal it, although you do not have to. The legs on this little sewing table have this beautiful fluted detail. I went ahead and applied my gold gilding wax to the balls on the legs, but then I want to go ahead and age it a little bit. So I'm going to apply a little bit of Wiesel glaze in black. I'm brushing my glaze on, making sure I get it into the fluted details of these legs. Once I've got my legs covered, I came back with a dry rag and I just wiped it back. This is going to leave that dark glaze just in the fluted detail of the legs and really make those details stand out. It also added a lightly aged effect to the gold and kind of toned it down a little bit. I applied 2 coats of satin clear coat over the top of my entire piece, and this piece is done and ready to photograph. I used a blanket ladder on the side with a pop of yellow blanket for some color. What do you guys think? This was a fun one to work on. If you enjoyed this video, you can find links for everything I use in the description for this post and more Brush by Brandy on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and my website at brushbybrandy.com.